Hello and welcome everybody. My name is Jerry and you're watching 3DHP. And this is part 2 of the Tigtak belt printer, which is an Ender 3 conversion. I'm using an Ender 3 Pro, and this is part 2 of my video. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to jump in, we're going to get the heated bed, get the wires soldered on it, and get it all taped up, and then we'll jump right into this next part here. So go ahead and check this out real quick, and then we'll come right back. Alrighty, for the next part, what we're going to do here is we're going to be mounting the bed on the extrusion for the belt printer. And it comes with these milled parts here. And the springs that were supplied were way too small. So use your original Ender 3 springs that you may have. And basically, here's how it goes together. Well, first off, as you can see, these two parts slide together. So you take the shaft, the threaded shaft, the adjuster, put the spring on it. Those, why I'm having an issue, here we go. And they slide right together and just kind of screw that in. And then it'll slide back and forth and gives you tension so you can raise or lower your bed to get the proper tension. And then we'll take I went out and they didn't have any bolts, so I bought some M5 by 30 0.80 pitch bolts. And I got, let's see, 2, 4, 6, 8, about 10 of them. I'll need 8. And here's an example how it screws into the extrusion. You'll have the 4 holes in the front of the printer, 4 holes in the back, 2 in the center, and then an additional 2 holes right here. And this is where you mount the bed at this point. Now later, if for any reason this bed has to be adjusted and it's not in the correct position, you can either re-drill and tap these holes to move it forward, or you can use T-nuts and bolts and you can slide it that way. But for now, we're going to go ahead and put it together. And I've done 3, so let's go ahead and get the 4th one in. And there we go. And now we'll grab our bed. As you just seen, I've got it all soldered up. I'm currently running the wires out. Now where exactly these need to run out, whether it's at this corner, up in the middle, or where, I'm not sure yet. But that is all taped up and ready to go. And we'll simply set it on the extrusion. Okay, that's going to be pretty close. I'm going to have to move those wires back a little bit. They're a little bit too close to that bolt, so I got to reroute them over here real quick. Okay, now I'm going to use my existing M4 bolts. I don't have any laying around, and I have mini bolts. They're countersunk because this aluminum bed is countersunk. So the existing M4 bolts that were on your Ender 3 bed, they're way too long. So if you don't have the shorter ones, the best thing you do before you cut them down is to put a nut on it. And by putting a nut on it, once you shorten it, you can screw the nut off and it will clean up the threads. That way it'll screw back in. If you cut it without having a nut on it, you'll have burrs on the end. It'll be very hard to clean up and screw it back in your work. So we screw a nut on about how long you want it to be. Take a Dremel or any kind of a file or anything, and when you cut that, you'll screw that nut off. It'll straighten out the threads, and then you can attach the bed It'll drop right in and you can attach it. And you don't want to leave it long because then you can't adjust the bed up and down because this will bottom out and hit the bottom of this bracket. So I'll give you a measurement here in a minute. But it basically only needs to be as thick. Once you put the bed on it, you can measure the distance from here to here when it's countersunk, and this needs to be long enough, probably like 5 millimeters, but it just needs to be long enough. So let me go real quick and get these cut down, and then we'll get it put together. And now the rear roller. You don't have to glue these sections together. They just press together. They're notched. Just line them up and press them together. And then at each end you'll have a bearing that will press in. See that inset right there? You got a bearing. These bearings are very tight on the rods. There's nut traps on all these. You have to press them in. I did not use a square nut. I used a round nut. On most of them the screw went in fine. On those where some of them did spin, I just took a tiny screwdriver and wedged it as I screwed the screw in, and it worked perfectly fine. And I did originally buy some nylocks, but the hole was too small for nylocks. And when you print these, do not use supports. You definitely don't want to get supports and try to dig it out because it's like impossible. Maybe you have to take a soldering iron or something, heat it up to press those nuts down in place. And then take a smaller rod or nail or something and run through it to center it before you put your screw in. Your bolt in, excuse me, not screw. Okay, that's seated flush. That one looks flush. Now I just have to center it. Okay, that looks good. Spins nice and tight. And then we'll bolt this up on the rear of the bed right here. Alrighty, let's put the belt on it, set it inside the frame, and then work on the front. Okay, I had to go out in the garage and get a big hammer and do some serious pounding. The one side, the bearings, I was able to press on the rod. It was hard, but I was able to press them on and get it lined up as you've seen. But the front was a totally different story. They were extremely tight, but I grabbed a socket, put a socket over top of the bearing on the closest race, and I tapped it on, and then I had to kind of jog it back and forth. Now these two pieces have 4 set screws which go in a groove on this rod. The rod is cut, but the grooves aren't the same in the same exact spot on either side. So I pulled it apart, twisted it, and then, I don't know, they should be cut the same. Now I'm sure on the released version they will be, but they don't line up. So the set screws are going to go in the groove on one side, and on the other side they're simply going to grab the steel rod. They're not going to drop down in the grooves because they're not lined up and they machined it, but that's fine. They're pressed on. Let's see, this goes, it's like this. I'm going to mount that right on the front right there. And then once it's on, then see, it'll be able to freely spin. The shaft is a little long, it sticks out both sides a little ways, that's fine. they'll have to work on that when they work out all the bugs. But yeah, let's go ahead and get that mounted up. Okay, now I've got some pulleys to put in. Right here on both sides we got a pulley. So we'll have two small bearings. That one will go on the inside on both sides. And then we got a small shaft which has a flat spot on one part. And then we'll have our pulley. And then we'll take the grub screw and tighten down on the pulley so it'll be right down inside there. And then we have a long rod that goes across the top, and we'll repeat the same thing on the top. So let's go ahead and get that in. Okay, for this next part I've got to put my pulley in here. And I've got pulleys that go underneath in here and one over here. So right here on both sides, one goes in here, and then my short belt. Then my stepper motor will go right up here on top of the bracket. So I've got to put bearings on the inside on both sides here. These little bearings, which I showed you before. Tiny little bearings. They've got to go on the inside. I run my long rod through it. And the rod with the longest flat spot on it, that's where your grub screw will attach when you slide it together. On that flat spot, that way it doesn't spin forever. The longest one will go on this side over here. Oh, that was a chore. Now just to tighten up the grub screws on the three pulleys. Okay, now I've used the smallest of the two belts, and if you print out the part that the company supplied, the stepper motor sits too high, the belt won't reach, it's too small. So my friend asked for printer, Liam, he redesigned the part with the stock stepper motor that came off the Ender 3 Pro, and it will sit down here a lot further down, which will allow the belt to fit. So let's go ahead and put that in. I had to buy a ton of T5 bolts, or M5, excuse me. See if we can get that hooked on. You can kind of see it there. And now to tension it, you can simply slide it forward or back. So if the belt's too loose, you simply slide the pulley, the whole mechanism, one way or another, the bracket, and it'll put tension on it. And while doing this build, like I said, because we're beta testers, there is no paperwork. There's simply a video and then other people that are building it. So you look at pictures on Discord, on their Facebook group. My friend Astro Printer is ahead of me on this build, so some of the work that I want to see, I simply refer to what he's already done to further on my build. But yeah, I've had to buy a ton of different bolts. Some like N5 15s, 20s, 25s, 30s, the different sizes. There's they supplied a ton of material and bolts, but there's a lot that aren't there. So I've been out quite a bit of money with more bolts, but once the kits are released, everything will be included. And that's basically how that works right there. And that can be tightened up as needed. And then down here on the frame, we've got these brackets right here, which I pre-built these with T-nuts. That way it makes it easier to put together. But I'm putting them in. And these two here go on the front of the bed down below. So let's see which way this goes in here, and I'll slide this one in. Okay, we'll install a stepper motor here in the front, and I'm going to be using M312s. And the connection I'm going to put to the rear of the printer. And now for the gear that drives the belt. Let me put some grub screws in it. Yeah, some of these shafts were machined wrong. The back one I got the bearings on fine. The front I had to go out in the garage and use a hammer and give it some help. So I'm going to have to tap this one also. Lay it on the side, grab a hammer and drive it on the rubber mallet. What I ended up doing is I put a weight underneath the bottom so it would hold it there, basically like that. Then I took a socket which is larger than the shaft. Oops, sorry. Took a socket larger than the shaft, put it over it, and I drove it down with a hammer to get that down in place. So I don't believe that's ever coming off. Anyway, it's on there very tight. I can take a screwdriver and I can barely shim it. I can put a screwdriver on it, put a little bit of pressure, tap on the rod, and I can pull it up just a hair. Anyway, it is what it is. So that shaft was slightly bored the wrong diameter, and things don't easily slip together, but we're making it work, guys. We're getting there. So there we go. You can see it better. So anyway, put a socket on it, tapped it down, supported the bottom so the shaft wouldn't move, the frame wouldn't break or anything like that. And we got that on. And then I got the belt on, so I just need to adjust the tension. Feels very loose where it's at. It feels pretty good right there. Okay, they've redesigned the power supply and control board boxes. So now the power supply will fit inside, and they added 4 holes for mounting. I'm not going to put the cover on it because I need as much airflow as possible. But I just reprinted a part here in my Hypercube that's going to cover up part of it. I put their cover in that fab and I cut it down. So basically, when this is mounted about like that, this cover will cover up the bottom area. That way your fingers don't accidentally get in the way, because this will get mounted upside down like that, and you don't want to be ever reaching underneath, accidentally sticking your fingers in the wire and getting zapped. So I just printed out part of the cover. It will protect it and cover it up right there. And whenever you take your Ender 3 apart, pull the box off. If you should disconnect all the wires or however you do it, always take a picture with your cell phone. That way you know exactly how it went back together. Whether you just unplug them from here or you disconnect them from the power supply, always take a picture. It makes it very easy for putting things back together. So now we're going to mount the switch. And here's how that's going to work. And it looks like it's going to be fine on top and bottom. I don't see anything getting in the way. You also, you can use hot glue to back it up. You know, put a little hot glue underneath it, hold it, and then put 2 screws in. Then hook all the wires back up, the power supply. So that'll work. We can work on that right now. And then this hole here on the side, into where we'll run out the wire and hook it back up to the motherboard. Well, anyway, we're getting there. We got to put the Y gantry on, hook up the belts. Power supply, got to put 4 bolts in. I got to find the right 4 bolts to fit. Control board is in. It's lined up pretty good. Might have to tweak it a little bit, and I can always throw hot glue on it to hold it in place. Screws grab pretty good, but I'll probably throw a little bit of hot glue on there to hold it, just to be sure. And when it goes underneath the back, the control board will go upright. It'll have a cover on it, which I have printed, once everything's hooked up. And then the power supply, which connects to the side of it, also goes in the back. It'll be face down and it'll be left open. Instead of putting the complete cover on it, like I mentioned earlier, I printed part of a cover. That way you don't accidentally get your hands in the wires. So that'll work out pretty nice. So yeah, it's a fun project. Like I say, it's a beta. Me and many people are testing it. My friend Astro Printer, Liam, is working on this. He's ahead of me on it. So I referred to their video and to Liam. Because Liam's ahead of me, I refer to things he's done or mistakes he's made, and I try to correct them. I still have some more bolts to put in here and there before the next video, and it's getting there. So, like I say, you know, once this is a release unit and there's a price out, it'll be announced and everybody will know. There's a, like I say, they sent out a ton of parts, which is great, but I've had to buy many bolts. So I've already spent quite a bit of money on nuts and bolts, and they made a few changes here and there, but it's getting there. So please like, subscribe, and share, everybody. I'd really appreciate it. Hope you've liked the video. Thank you for coming on this journey. I appreciate all the comments and all the amazing views that I've had. This video pretty much went viral in the first one. So thank you very much. We're getting there. It's a lot of fun. If you got any comments, please leave them down below. I'll have links to everything that we've talked about, like the first video, down below in the comments. I'll have a link to Astro Printer, to the company that's designing this. There'll be a link to them, where they're at over on Discord, where they're at on Facebook. And thank you very much. Please like, subscribe, and share. And, you know, have an awesome day. Have a great weekend. You know, happy printing. Thank you very much, everybody.